the risk of staying the same greater than the risk of changing. And most people get those two incorrectly. They've got them flipped.
Hello there, it's me, Steve Mellor, and welcome in to Growth Ready, the podcast that allows high performers to reveal the reality behind what it means to ready yourself for growth, the personal and professional challenges along the growth journey, while also allowing the high-performance executive coach in me to satisfy his curiosity toward what drives optimal performance. On this episode, we welcome in financial expert Debra Bradley, who in her work today as a fractional CFO ensures people relate to risk in ways where they understand that all growth worth having comes on the other side of readying ourselves to both step into and learn from the unknown. This episode is brought to you by Scribe, the workflow AI platform that automatically turns any process into a beautiful shareable guide in seconds. Say goodbye to manual screenshots or typing out step-by-step instructions and join the already 4 million people working 15 times faster with Scribe. Get started today at scribehow.com. That's SCRIBEHOW.com. Hello there and welcome back into the most recent episode of Growth Ready. I am so excited to be welcoming in Debra Bradley today. And Debra is an example of what this community of Growth Ready has become, as we previously had Kenneth Lowe on the show a number of episodes ago, and Kenneth introduced me to Debra, and this is what this community is becoming now, just a whole bunch of high achievers wanting to contribute to what it means to be growth ready. So that's where we're going to start here today, Debra, and I'm going to ask you what I ask everybody. What does it mean to you to be growth ready?
I love the question. Thanks, Steve, for having me, and I'm excited for our discussion today. When I look back at my career and my personal life also, there have been spurts of growth, personal and spiritual growth I have gone through. Some years I've grown a ton, and then other years were certain maintenance. So we think about those years where there's been high growth, and the thing it has in common is embracing change. And also thinking about, my motto is whenever I've taken a risk, it's worked out. It hasn't worked out as planned. And that's the beauty of when you think about being growth ready, you can have all the plans you want, but if you embrace the future and a lot of change and don't hold on too much to the plans, hey, did it work out exactly as I thought it was? You'll really get to a bigger spot just embracing the journey of change.
I love it straight away. And so for me, what I hear is so important for every listener from the outset here is that no matter the plan, growth is not always about the result. It is about the journey. And it's cliche, right? It's one of those cliche things. We've heard it 100 times. We've seen it on some nice posters and it looks really nice. But that so much of what you're saying here is that when you've taken that risk, it's worked out, but it's not necessarily worked out in the sense of the result. It's worked out in the sense of what you've gotten from that journey of pursuing the risk. So piggyback off of that for me for a moment. Help people better understand why that is and how you maybe experience that.
I think I'm a person that is generally pretty happy, but I also describe myself as a malcontent. So when you think about change and how to easily embrace change, the current existence should be somewhat uncomfortable. Be uncomfortable with where you're at so that wherever you're going in the future is an improvement from where you came. And that doesn't mean disliking your surroundings or the people, but consistently thinking about how to get yourself to a different spot, but you don't know where that different spot is. very few people would buy a plane ticket and get on the plane if someone were to tell them, I don't know where the destination is. I don't know if you're going to have a hotel room. I don't know if you're going to speak the language. So you have to feel comfortable with that. What would make you do that? Well, if you're in an unpleasant place, you might roll the dice and get there.
Yeah, I love that idea. And I think it forces me immediately just to sort of look at my own surroundings and ask, when they do become comfortable, how can I maybe make them more uncomfortable? And I'm hearing that straight away, is that you almost have this sense of, hang on, when I'm feeling a state of comfort for too long, it might be time for me just to check in and say, why have I allowed this to happen? How have I allowed this to happen, to be comfortable? And what can I do to kind of shake things up a little bit? Like, is that accurate?
Yes, exactly. For when I grew up, we had a small business, and I grew up in a beautiful town, very nice. But I always thought, what else is out there for me? And again, embrace the journey and embrace that road to experiencing different things that I hadn't seen before.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the risk taker that is Debra. I think that's always, I love when people give me these insights and use certain terms to that when answering that initial question. And so my immediate thought is like, okay, so Debra is a person who is very attuned with taking risks, but where did that risk taker come from? Did it have a little bit to do with that upbringing of being around businesses? Like, I'm just really fascinated by what has allowed you to maybe find that comfort in the idea of risk. Is that something that you have felt you were born with, or have you figured that out over time?
Combination of both. As I looked at my childhood growing up, I've always been fascinated by math, data, and putting frameworks together in my head. When people think about risk, most people miscalculate the risk. For example, I do open water swimming down in Monterey, and I swim with a group of people, and several of them have wristbands and ankle bands to ward off sharks, swimming with sharks. If people understand the very low likelihood of ever experiencing a shark, you're more likely to get hit on the head with a coconut and experience a very bad result from that than you are getting bitten by a shark. So one of the things that I notice as I go into new ventures and take risks, it's not that I am a risk taker, because I know taking out a chainsaw at home when I don't know how to do that is really risky, but people often miscalculate the risk. If you try a new venture and it doesn't work out, or go somewhere and it doesn't work out, the risk of nothing really happens to you in failure. More times than not, especially as it's business, if you're not experiencing bodily harm and you're mentally resilient, the downside is very low and the upside is massive. So that's just a framework that I've used, and that I am uniquely built that way to think about things that way.
Yeah, we're gonna go into some of that unique ways that you're built for sure. But I want to just kind of stay on that idea of the miscalculation of the risk. And for me, what I'm hearing, it's almost as though we've allowed ourselves to define risk incorrectly. You know, we've allowed ourselves to see risk as, you know, the potential outcome, which it is to an extent. But you're here trying to push it and say, hey, well, what if we didn't make it about the outcome, and instead we make it about just simply entertaining the fact that risk is everywhere, it's ever present, and can we just step into it almost as the teacher that it can be, as opposed to maybe the result that it is? Am I getting that right?
Exactly. Evolutionary, we are geared toward, when we look at our reptilian brain, it's risk, it's flight or fight. But if you sit with it for a minute and talk through it and think through it, and also practice being resilient. take some small steps, take a risk, take small steps, then look back in reflection, and you realize all you did was learn something new. Whether it worked or not, you just learned something new. So you do have to override your built-in mental model, and you can definitely become more comfortable with that.
Yeah, and let's go there. So let's talk to Debra, the open water swimmer, a little bit here, in the sense of like, okay, it's not your everyday thing. It's not like you're just going to the gym. It's a very different commitment that you're making, and you're almost acknowledging that with that commitment too, you're wanting to go that extra mile, very much literally in a lot of ways, but also just in terms of, well, what can I learn? Here we are again. What can I learn by taking this added risk of maybe entering, a scenario such as open water swimming versus just simply going to the pool and going for a swim? And you talk about that sort of internal operating system that we're born with and how we almost need to reprogram that. How have you reprogrammed that? Whether it be more so in that open water swimming landscape that you've gone through, or what is it through the course of your life that has allowed you maybe to reprogram this operating system that you were born with?
Yeah, exactly. I do think it is practice. I was lucky in childhood to grow up in a pretty neat environment where we were encouraged to be off on our own quite a bit and to try different things. I would say in terms of open water swim, and I did experience this when I first got into the ocean, I have to practice what I'm doing. I was on swim team in high school, and it's very comforting to know, and it does help. You're trained to look at the bottom of the pool, and when you come to that X, it's time to do a flip turn, right? Mm-hmm. And you always have complete visibility. With the open water swim, you don't always have complete visibility, even if you're in very clear waters, which I do swim in very clear waters. There could be rocks on the bottom. There could be kelp on the bottom. It's interesting to see. So taking that first step and incrementally pushing yourself into that risk, you also uncover, and then stepping back and assessing what's the likelihood. I'm in 10 feet of water. No one's ever seen a shark here. Mm-hmm. Do I have the risk of seeing a shark correctly calibrated versus getting hit by a wave, or maybe I'll get my foot caught on kelp or something else? So as I assess the landscape and just thinking back, and you got to get yourself back to the safety zone, and then reassessing that risk. The shark is not the most riskiest thing that I'm doing with open water swimming. My head's getting cold, or I hit a big wave. So I think it's recalibrating those risks.
Yeah, and something you said there as well is the incremental component too. Is that you're not telling somebody, hey, if you've not figured out how to swim yet, forget the pool, go straight to the ocean, go figure it out there. Like you're not saying that. You're acknowledging that all of this is very much a scale. There's a scale to this, and we're trying to inch people along on this scale of risk to where it's like, hey, we just want to introduce you to the notion that every time you not only perceive a risk and then take on that risk and come out the other side of it, there's an opportunity to go and explore another one, and knowing that every time you get those reps and that experience and exposure to it, you're simply leveling up that operating system in terms of how in tune you can become to entertaining greater risks down the road. And I think this is a great segue into really what you've done in your career as well, is that the majority of your career has been in that of the financial industry, and so to be able to look at that and say, well, this is a volatile industry where a lot of risk taking is kind of par for the course. It comes with the territory. It's what we're doing is we're always navigating what's the best way to use our money and how's the best way for us to, just simply be able to spend when we need to not be spending, however you want to put it. I'm curious, how has this demeanor and this sort of way that you've built yourself served you in these environments where maybe people aren't as equipped, let's say, to entertain risks maybe the way that you would?
Yeah, I think what happens is people miscalculate, or as they're looking at something, often in my career, I've combined looking at the financial results of taking an action in the future and implemented some technology with it. The risk of not implementing that technology and staying up with the more modern or futuristic way of doing things is much riskier than implementing that technology. And I've seen this over and over again in my career, that if you're stale or stagnant, that actually presents a larger risk than if you're trying different things and maybe it's not working out. Now, there's a calibration to that in finance. Don't bet the farm if you haven't quite worked out the model as you're training on that risk. And that's what research and development is for a lot of different companies. It's training to risk.
I love that. And I think there's now my mind's going to this next level of just risk in the sense of, so many people listening to this are going to be like, okay, so you're telling me, Debra, that for me to consistently level up, if I just simply accept that the current model is the way of doing things, I'm immediately getting behind.
Correct.
I'm immediately
Bingo.
putting myself at greater risk by staying still. Like that, and that we're not hearing that very often. That is not
right.
That is not a narrative that's being pitched a whole lot out there. And so, how are you helping folks? Because the work that you're doing now as a fractional CFO, I think this is where it gets so interesting. Is your expertise, this very insight that you're pitching to us right now? People are saying, we need you to come in. Now, I'm curious, how ready are these people to actually hear what it is that you're pitching? Because I'm hearing it right now, and I'm like, gosh, that's going to get people uncomfortable real quick.
That will get people uncomfortable. So I look at two people, the CEO of an existing or maybe leader of an existing business. The biggest challenges we have with people like that is, if they've had a lot of success with the way things have worked so far, they are much more reluctant to change, because just like taking a risk, there's a reinforcing factor in me and my life of taking a risk and it works out. There's a reinforcement loop for people who have been successful in the past. No, keep doing things exactly the same way. And we are in the most exciting period of rapid change, whether it's artificial intelligence or we're all looking at resetting how maybe global trade works or finance works. It's all of the above. So people that are going to have the biggest challenge with it are going to be people who have had a lot of success with the way things have worked. And I think they are, in my mind, the biggest rollers of the dice and biggest gamblers there are. It's not the people that want to move on to a different environment.
Yeah, and even just the way that you're prefacing that this time that we're in right now is the exciting period of change, like that immediately helps all of our listeners understand, like, okay, the way Debra looks at it is high change equals excitement. And again, let's talk about the majority versus the minority. The majority don't look at change like that. They look at change as high change equals high anxiety, high stress, all this kind of stuff. And I think what I love about this is that we're entertaining exactly what it means to be growth ready. We're going straight back to that first question. Like, again, you can be anxious about change. You can be scared of it even.
Yeah.
But if growth is what you want, This is the framing that you need to approach growth with. You have to get on board when high change is the norm. And that's, like you said, that's the period of time that we're in right now. We are in a phase of high change, But the return, from what I'm hearing from you, Debra, is the return could potentially be as high as it's ever been as well.
It is exactly right. For people who embrace it, as a chief financial officer, what I look at is what are the returns, what's the opportunity for maybe growing revenue or increasing your profits. The other part of my skill set is risk assessment, right? And that's what I like to flip on its head. Is the risk of staying the same greater than the risk of changing? And most people get those two incorrectly. They've got them flipped. I think the risk of staying the same, whether it's through some new biotechnology or artificial intelligence, is much higher than embracing and changing and incrementally moving to that new environment.
Yeah. How do we, let's say someone's listening to this right now, and I know my mind's already going there. I'm starting to coach myself as you're presenting some of these insights. Let's say someone's listening to this and they say, okay, so the battle that I have is the risk of change versus the risk of staying the same. Where might a person start? I think this could be a great way for you to let us in a little bit of how you maybe entertain some of that initial conversation and analysis when you're working with a client of saying, okay, we're now going to sit down and we're going to discuss the difference between the risk of the change and the risk of staying the same. Where does a person start with that? And I know it's tricky when we're not talking about a specific example. Like, I understand that part here, but I think I almost want you to look at this as like knowing that the person's going to be challenging to work with when you're presenting this notion.
Yeah.
What are you doing with that person initially, just to help them maybe get on board and then maybe approach this whole process to begin with?
Yeah, it's really interesting that people in their personal lives will adapt new technology really quickly and not even know they're doing it. In their professional lives, they take the business as, no, it's too risky. For example, I am working with a client that says, well, everybody remembers Kodak, right? Or maybe some people don't these days, but when you took a picture, well, what happened to Kodak? The Kodak actually invented digital photography, and the reason they didn't move on was the classic innovator's dilemma that we see people talk about all the time. They believed that digital photography was going to cannibalize their existing business. They were right, but they weren't going to, therefore they weren't going to do it themselves, and they misassessed the risk that someone else is going to do it for you. Mm-hmm. People, especially internally at companies, big and small, don't want to disrupt their business, but they think, I won't disrupt it. They don't often look at someone else is already working on disrupting your business. So you need to move on. And then you point to that, like, look, you have a phone in your hand, or there's an example that I remember when Uber came along, and Uber I think twice went to Yellow Cab and said, hey, let's partner with this and let's let your drivers know Uber. No, we have it all locked down. We're the only number. And they failed to see what mobile phone was going to do to their business. And by the time they really realized the disruptive nature, it was too late. And when you think about...
This episode of Growth Ready is sponsored by Scribe, the workflow AI platform that makes documenting and sharing processes truly effortless. Folks, when I look at my day, I'm constantly fielding questions from my team. How to pull reports, where to find files, how to set things up. And Scribe has been a total game changer in giving me that time I need back in my day. In a matter of seconds, Scribe turns my workflows into a beautiful, shareable guide, complete with screenshots and text instructions that ensures I no longer waste time in my day with the same repetitive tasks and conversations. Since using Scribe at Growth Ready, I've personally loved how it uses AI to do the work for me by following every click in real time. I can literally see my step-by-step guide being built by Scribe while I create training plans and document workflows to better serve my team. I've saved hours, folks, literally hours in my week by being able to create PDFs or shareable links that I can send to clients in an instant. So I'm asking you, I'm telling you, free yourself and your team from manually documenting processes and join the 94% of the Fortune 500 and 4 million people worldwide already using Scribe to work 15 times faster. So head to scribehow.com. That's SCRIBEHOW.com and start working faster today.
How quickly Uber took off. It really only took 3 tries on Uber, or I only use Waymo these days. It only takes, 3 tries. There's another disruption. It really doesn't take very much, especially for early adopters, to jump on that.
Yeah. I am intuitively, I knew exactly where you were going the moment you started answering that question. I was just like, oh my gosh, bring it on, Debra. This is what we're about on this show, like the personal versus the professional battle that we deal with, and it steps right into my world as well with the work that I do. Of just one of the first things I typically talk to when I'm speaking to a CEO, a board, whatever it may be, about me coming in and working with them is, just do other people understand the stakes that you're operating within the organization? And typically they don't. Typically the people in the C-suite are the ones that best understand the stakes of the organization and the stakes of their decision making, which is why making decisions at the top is so much more difficult, because you're blinded more often than not by just this interpretation of what the stakes are. Whereas on a personal level, we don't look at things as high stakes, low stakes. Typically, we just say, hey, this looks like a cool little thing. I'm going to start using it in my life. What a wonderful invention. And I'm not even going to think about the costs and the risks and all that kind of thing associated with it. And then suddenly you're in that same decision, really that same path of logic, but the seat has changed. And suddenly now the entire internal operating system is influenced because the seat has changed, because the stakes have changed. And here you are suggesting that we need to find a better way to entertain that initial conversation of just, like, I understand the seat is a big seat. I understand the stakes are very high. However, let's address the risk and the benefits that can come with the change.
Exactly. And the best CFOs will do that. They'll have a forward look. It's easy to say, here's the 5-10 reasons why we shouldn't do X.
Right.
But it's harder to say, here's the 10 reasons you need to do X. Don't worry about these other things, or incrementally move the organization and the people on the teams to that better future. And don't misunderstand. I think too often in business, people, again, look at their own success and over-calibrate or maybe under-calibrate. Someone's going to come in and disrupt you. As Jeff Bezos says, your margin's my opportunity. And people misunderstand that assessment. Yeah.
And there's gosh, there's some my mind's almost can't, my voice can't keep up with my mind right now with what you're bringing out here, Debra. And I think what I'll say is, for anybody listening, if you do find that struggle, that push and pull when it comes to the professional side of your life versus the personal, something I really want to encourage, and this is something that I do in the work that I do today, is how can we personalize the professional process? Like, how can we just personalize it and make it about, listen, if this is just you sat down, you the individual making a decision, and you're speaking from a place of logic, and you're pushing out the noise. And I want to even take your insight there, Debra, and go one step further with it. If sometimes when we have this list of 5 things not to do something, sometimes the list of why we should is only one. It's only one thing. But for whatever reason, we dismiss the 5. We make this ratio of 5. Well, it's 5 to 1, so it's a no. And it's like, well, hang on one second. Like, the five may not be greater or more of a reason, just that one. And the world I entertain today in the work that I'm doing with everybody is that, hey, if there's one reason, let's at least discuss it. Let's at least pursue it. Let's at least move it down the field a little bit before we just dismiss it, because it was so easy for you to come up with the 5 reasons not to. Because again, in our personal life, we're so much more willing to say yes so quickly. Even if someone just gives us one reason to do it, we kind of push away the 5 reasons not to. So
Yes.
easily, you know?
Yeah. And I think people, oftentimes leaders, being great leaders in trying to keep their people safe or out of harm's way, because that's what a leader does, thinks it's going to be uncomfortable for people to change, and therefore I don't want them to experience this discomfort. But that's exactly, number one, why you should do it. And what I've noticed is the leader can keep the team safe and go into uncharted territory at the same time. Once you start on that journey, it creates a level of excitement and employee engagement that is rarely seen anywhere else. I've seen this multiple times in my own career. We're putting this in there. Oh, it's scared. If you, as the leader, can, hey, I'll go first and I'll show you. That takes a lot of vulnerability. That takes a different skill set than what made us leaders. What made us leaders are accomplishments, checks off lists. I did the test right. I got that presentation right. Is your organization rewarding risk-taking, failure, and making it fun for the employees? And then when you parallel it to go home tonight and tell me how you worked 5 years ago with personal technology, people realize, yeah, I'm an innovator. I'm a disruptor too.
Yeah, absolutely. And my thought there as you were speaking just went to this idea that so often when we are approached with this notion of change and we have this ability as leaders to either implement it in our environments and with our teams or to avoid it, there is this incredible result that can come in what you're alluding to here, is that of everybody is now exposed to this is kind of how we do things now. And it goes right back to your initial insight around what it means to be growth ready, is that we don't have to be so caught up now in the result, because the process itself has become such a reward. The excitement, the innovation, the safety. I love that you use that word safety, because here we are talking about risk and change. It's like, turns out if you do this effectively as a cohesive unit and you set the right boundaries around it for what is considered smart risk and smart change versus the opposite, it is a very safe environment for people to step into, because they understand that there are regulations that come with it, that there are boundaries that we need to respect, and that we've been very exhaustive about what those boundaries are before we've set foot towards what this could look like operating as a team. And that's what I love about where we've gone with this conversation now. It's like you're making it abundantly clear that because this environment can be created, we can actually become way more accepting that sometimes whatever the plan was and result that we strive to go out and achieve, it didn't happen. But that's okay, because the process itself was the journey and the reward, and it's allow us to actually grow in the long term.
Exactly. And you're conditioning all your group and your employees to look out for, to evaluate that risk and reward. Oh, it hasn't worked out, but guess what? I saw a new way to do something. Right. We tripped over it on the journey, and we never would have tripped over it had we not been on the journey before. And history is full of people that have done this, especially leaders. There's that famous story of Ernest Shackleton, the explorer that went on a wooden ship, and he brought his team to Antarctica. The ship sank, and the group of people spent the next 2 years trying to survive on the ice. Amazingly, not one person was lost. So the leader has to think, I'm taking my group on this journey, but also what's paramount is we can go on this journey. This incredible thing happens to us, and we all survived it and learned a bunch on the way.
Yeah, what a great example of that in that anecdote. I think that's something we can all relate to almost. In my mind, it's like we making igloos out of wooden boats is kind of where my mind went. But I think, that in itself is like, you hear those two things and you just go, how are those two how is that group the same group that has allowed themselves to go on a journey in one way like that and then somehow survive in a completely different way? And that speaks to so much of what you're saying, is that open-mindedness towards what change can look like. And this is where I really want to go now. There's something about you clearly have this adamant belief that we have the ability, that we have the potential to actually do what it is you're putting out there. And this is something you and I share. I believe we were put on this earth to step into and live into our potential. I think we all have that ability to do that. And so much of what you're talking to here is how you're doing exactly that, whether it be through your role as a fractional CFO or any of these other steps along the way in your career path. You're alluding to the fact that, hey, if we can get past this reluctance to change and reluctance to risk, it's not only going to allow us to move and grow and learn, etc. It's going to allow us all individually to step into our potential of what we're really capable of becoming.
Exactly. And that's what makes it fun about this. So people often think, oh, I'm doing this for a business or business. Sure, you're doing it for that. We want returns. There's also an incredible, inspiring personal journey that each person can live into their full potential also. And often, as you know, you probably counsel a lot of people, mostly if we're not living into our potential, or we're the biggest stumbling block. It's how we're seeing things and how we're navigating, right? So it really comes down. And to let the teams talk about that, maybe get somebody who's an expert facilitator and understanding this to get the team to talk about it, and they'll illuminate different areas. Yeah, I really did that. And people who weren't risk takers or innovative, I've seen this before, now tag them. I'm an innovator. I do this. This is what I do for my company.
Yeah, there's definitely that journey of identity I'm hearing. Like, it's like when people start on this journey, they can't see themselves as this figure of, someone who could be a creative, someone who could be an innovator, and then somehow just simply going through this, it's like, hey, maybe there's parts of me that does have this. Maybe I do have this muscle of innovation. And had I not gone on this journey, I could never have possibly discovered that. Does that mean I'm a flat out innovator? I'm ready to change my LinkedIn title? No, maybe not. But at the same time, I have that muscle. Like, I have that capability to be able to at least practice it as and when the situation calls for it, right?
Exactly. And get yourself incrementally on that journey. When we think about artificial intelligence, that Silicon Valley to this day is still unclear who exactly is going to make money off this. But if you wait until that plays out, there'll have been other people already on this journey that maybe not only will have that financial reward, but they'll have the reward of, hey, I went into uncharted territory. I tried a lot of things that didn't work, but you only need one to work.
Right.
Yeah.
And I want to use this now as a way to bridge into a conversation around AI, because again, it's something I continue to try to educate myself on. I consider myself to be somewhat of an early adopter, but I was joking with you before we pressed record, is that has that phase already passed? Have we already passed the phase of early adoption for AI, for ChatGPT, whatever lens you want to look at this through? Has that ship sailed, and is anybody who's now reluctantly maybe getting on board already too late and already behind? And so I'm just curious as to how, you alluded to it earlier that, for you in your work, the way in which you've been able to level up the people that you work with is getting them on board with the technology that's going to allow them to get there. So what kind of role has AI been playing, at least in your world recently?
Yeah, all of my clients have some component of AI adoption. They're either assessing it, adopting it, or starting new businesses or divisions with it. Wow. Maybe I attract those kind of people. I'm not really sure. So to answer your first question, are people behind if they're not adopting it? They're not at all. Secondly, we have to think AI is built into a lot of what we already do. So if you think to yourself you're not using it, you probably are. I think it is going back to open water swimming and the sharks. The people that I see who are most reluctant are envisioning dangers that just aren't there. It is more dangerous not to get on this journey. I've had several clients say, well, my information is proprietary, therefore I can't put it in. And there is some of that. You have to pay attention to what is confidential and trade secrets. I think a lot less than people realize are truly trade secrets, are unique secrets that they could put into AI. The other concern is I shouldn't do that. Something dangerous will happen. There's different countries around the world that are regulating artificial intelligence because either it'll get so intelligent that'll create some kind of doomsday, or it could be put in the hands of bad actors. Maybe there are some bad actors that couldn't figure out how to build a certain type of lethal weapon, and now they can. But that pales in comparison to not going on that journey and the change that's about to happen if you're not on the journey. And people have to have faith in humankind that we've always overcome those challenges, no matter what those are. And so really go on that journey. And as I said, no one is clear as to how people are making money off it yet. So it's an incredible opportunity to take the road less traveled.
Yeah, well, you're singing from my hymn sheet now when we talk about the road less traveled. It's something that clients of mine are all too familiar with, and for me, a lot of my work is based around how can we encourage people to do exactly that. But something that you're talking about here too is this idea that when we just lean in. We just lean into this new idea, this new way of doing things. The opportunity just to simply learn as we go, which is so much of what you've alluded to here. Are we comfortable just saying, hey, I don't know what this is yet, but I'm going to step into it anyway and just learn as I go, and not allow ourselves to refrain from taking that step because we're victims of extremism? I think that's the other part of this too. And that for me is so much of my work today is whenever we present an idea of change and something new is, well, let's present the most extreme circumstance to begin with and use that as my reason not to take the step. And it's like, well, that's the extreme. Right. We cannot base initial steps off of the extreme. And typically, even when we do acknowledge the extreme, it's so many steps into the future that 5 or 6 steps just to get you started isn't going to have any impact on that extreme outcome anyway,
Exactly.
And that for me, I have to assume that extremism is just something that you must be so familiar with in the work that you do.
I am. And going back to my history, it's the calculation of risk. So when I'm working with fellow CFOs or also with some founders that maybe are reluctant to go on that journey, one of the skills I have is I don't know whether it's a feature or a bug. Sometimes it's both, but I am able to quantify anything and everything, and so that helps. The quantification doesn't have to be correct. It just is a representation of a framework that people can think about. For example, whether it's going back to the sharks or Kodak figuring out how to do digital photography, what is the risk that our business gets cannibalized? Or calculate the incidence, and you can come up with a simple widget and a simple idea of what's the chance I'm going to see a shark or get attacked by a shark. It is so low versus having that experience and getting on that journey.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you present it that way, people can can assess risk in a more clear-eyed framework than if it's a catastrophe. Like you're saying, they are overemphasizing the risk and what might happen. So an easy way to do it might be quantifying it or telling stories.
Absolutely. And for me, I work in the world of emotion. It's so hard to quantify things and make things tangible when so much of what I do, I mean, never mind the work I'm actually doing, even simply pitching the work that I'm doing half the time. It's like, well, how can we measure the return on investment of me, feeling better about myself? It's like, well, it's difficult to do, right? It's difficult to do. But at the same time, what you're speaking to here is if we can actually remove some of that emotional connection at times and just make it a bit more quantifiable and just say, hey, is there a way we can measure this? Is there a way we can create a scale where you can see like the likelihood of this outcome that you've presented is so far along on that scale based on inaction, which is obviously at the complete other end of the scale? Well, now someone can just say, well, all right, maybe it's okay for me to entertain the idea of inching along the scale a little bit and just being able to move from one spot to the next, right?
Exactly. And sometimes people, maybe they're not as familiar with thinking abstract thoughts. And that's where leadership and modeling the way comes in. If I, as a leader, show, hey, I'm doing it, this is how it works, and people see in actuality what is happening and that there's very little danger, especially if it's exciting, like I like going to new places, they see that excitement and it's infectious, and the enthusiasm can propel the team into different directions or propel a person in different directions they haven't often taken. The other, I've had people approach me and say, I know I need to get on the AI journey. I have this particular problem in my business. And I say, all right, let's take it together. Let's put a proof of concept in place, and you can see how it works. Be careful about attaching, like we started out saying, too many outcomes to it. It's not about, hey, I could do this. It's about the journey and what we discover along the way.
Yeah, I love it. And I love that you've been able to land this conversation around leadership too. And it allows me to actually just segue to what I want to be our final insight here, is that very occasionally when I have guests come on, they'll say something right before we start recording, which I'm just like, that's gold, and you need to say that in the interview. That's useless me just hearing it. I want everybody to hear that. And you gave me this beautiful metaphor before we started getting going, and I think it's a great metaphor. While it represents so much of what we've spoken about, I think it's a great metaphor for leadership. So I'd love for you to share us that metaphor in closing here.
Yeah, so what we were talking about is how was last week, and I was so shocked to find I was looking to get some redwood planks to match existing parts of my house, and the existing parts of my house are fine-grained redwood, and a fine-grained redwood, each ring and each grain represents a year, and the thing that makes old redwood so interesting is these trees have grown for hundreds and hundreds of years, and that's why they've gotten so big, and that's what fine-grained redwood is really about. I started doing research, and I thought, well, how is it that these trees have been able to exist for hundreds of years? The biological evolution of it was as they encountered things in their environment, whether it's fog, pests, or fire, they've developed resistance to all of that. The reason they're able to stand. So if you're able to exist in an environment and evolve with the environment of all the risks, those are 3 dramatic risks, and build into yourself an evolutionary resilience to it, your legacy lives on. Your beautiful legacy lives on. And now you can see why California and other people protect those long-living trees as long as they do.
I love it. Just to immerse yourself in difficult surroundings and and find comfort in the discomfort of it. It's the moment you shared it, and we'd already spoken before we got on this interview, and I knew a little bit about you, and I had an idea where we might go today. And the moment you shared that metaphor, I said, "Oh my gosh!" Like if there were a tree that represented if there's a tree that represents Debra Bradley, we found it, right? We found the tree. So it's so ideal. It's so perfect, and everything about this conversation was ideal and perfect. I really did enjoy just having you join us, and I knew this was going to be a great conversation. I love that. One of my favorite things to acknowledge from time to time is just, here you are, you're a fractional CFO. We could have come on and got into the weeds of all the financial elements of organizations and what organizations and leaders need to know about the financial structure of their organization. You know what? We didn't talk about any of that. We talked about specifically the bold truths that come with steering your organization through change and therefore steering it through growth. And like that's the gold. That's the stuff that we need to be listening to.
Exactly. Yeah, it's been great.
Yes. Well, before I let you go, Debra, as I do with everybody else, please share with us if there's any way we can be connecting with you, learning more about your work. Where can we go to get all that information?
Yeah, perfect. I am active. My website is bradleyventures.io. I can give it to you in the show notes. I also have LinkedIn profile, and every once in a while I post on X also with some of my ideas on innovation, risk-taking, and how to get to a better spot both personally and professionally.
Love it. Well, all that, as you alluded to, all that information will be available in our show notes. And again, Debra, just thank you so much for the generosity of insight, for the wonderful ideas, and certainly you're challenging some people's ways of thinking, and that's what we're all about on this show. So again, I just appreciate your time and best of luck with everything moving forwards.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Steve, and good luck with Growth Ready. I love it. Love the concept.
Thank you. And my thanks again to Debra for joining us on this episode. What an incredible conversation. I love as well just finishing the episode with this powerful metaphor around the redwood. And I have no doubt that kind of conversation is going to have some sort of catalyst for you just to maybe look at risk a little differently, look at change a little differently, be a little bit more open-minded to it. And that's very much where I want to close and bring this episode to a point where I can leave you with some food for thought on how you can maybe reapproach and reassess what risk means to you. My question to you is this: where in your life are you not taking risks? More importantly, why? What is it about that part of your life that prevents you from taking the risk? If you listen to what it was we discussed on this episode, what you will have heard is that when we take risks, we have an opportunity to simply learn. We have an opportunity to see our process for what it is. Is it effective? Is it not? Is it sustainable? Is it not? It gives you an opportunity just to simply learn as you go. And when we get caught up in the potential result of the risk, we prevent ourselves from truly learning, from truly growing through the risk. So I encourage you to look at your life. Again, ask that question. Where in my life am I not taking risks? Specifically, why am I not taking risks in that area? If you can get a little curious around that and maybe observe and discover something there, I would personally like to believe that you may just be a little bit more willing to take a step. Just one. That's it. You don't have to overcome the entire gap that you maybe see or opportunity for growth. You simply need to take a step. And if the risk itself is what's preventing you from taking that initial step, ask yourself why it is you're not taking that step and lean into the risk so you can learn more about what it is you're trying to achieve. Again, my thank you to Debra for joining us on the show. My thank you to you, as always, for joining us and for paying attention all this time, for sticking around to the end and allowing yourself to be growth ready when it comes to anything and everything that you're trying to achieve. As always, make sure you're sharing the show. Make sure you're subscribing to the show. Make sure you are leaving a rating. This was absolute gold. If you click anything other than that 5th star on Apple Podcasts, then shame on you. You're missing the whole point of the power and the impact of the show. Go ahead and press that 5th star for me, and I look forward to doing this again with you all very soon. Bye for now. Thanks again to Scribe for sponsoring the episode, and remember to head to scribehow.com to automatically turn your processes into a step-by-step guide in seconds. So stop answering the same repetitive questions and work 15 times faster by heading to scribehow.com and start working faster today.
Thank you for tuning in to Growth Ready. If you liked what you heard and are feeling ready to grow, Be sure to leave a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share the episode with someone you know is ready to fuel their growth journey today. We love our community, so don't hesitate to reach out to us at podcast@growthready.com. And until next time, we are Growth Ready, and you will be too.